Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm here to chat with you about yoga for stress and anxiety. I think the timing is appropriate and we could all use a little bit more relaxation and stress relief in our lives, depending on where you are in the world. I mean, globally dealing with a pandemic, COVID, and or possibly environmental crises like wildfires that are running rampant across the West Coast. So my hope for you is to stay safe and healthy, and to bring a little bit of awareness and ease into your life about what you can do to manage these stressful times, and how a yoga practice, and maybe a particular yoga practice, can help you stay grounded. So with that, I prepared a few slides which I'd like to walk you through because I think it's helpful to have a visual to go with topics that are a little bit headier, like neuroscience and nervous system. So yoga for stress and anxiety. There's a lot of different styles of yoga out there, and underneath the style of asana, underneath a particular shape or movements you make with your body, really there's a fundamental goal. There's a fundamental process of creating equilibrium in the body, and you probably heard this a million times from like your doctor, your mother, at news articles, Instagram posts about the benefits of a yoga practice. We all have heard it helps reduce stress, it helps lower your heart rate, it can help you sleep more soundly. The one that I love, that I don't think gets as much clout, I guess I would say, is that ability to create a pause. And I love the way that Tara Brock talks about it as a pause between, she calls it the sacred pause. And she talks about this as a pause between stimulus and response. So when you get activated, when that anxiety or that stress starts to flare up, and for a lot of us, it's kind of like an undercurrent of our lives right now. So we're not even maybe aware of when we're getting activated. And that response mechanism that when you're in a sympathetic nervous system response is already flight or fight. That's such a tongue twister for me. You're already in that flight or fight state. So you're already reacting without even consciously acknowledging that you have chosen a reaction. And evolutionary, that's served us well. It's kept us alive. It has allowed us to progress as a society and grow as a human population. But today we're not running away from tigers and cheetahs and foraging for food and looking for shelter. Well, maybe some of us are right now, depending on where we are in the world. But more often than not, we already have a roof over our heads, and we have food in our fridge. So that fight or flight response maybe is not serving us as well in our modern day society. So how is yoga helpful for this? Well, on a really simply put, easy to understand, wrap your head around perspective, it allows you to focus in the current moment. So we ask you in a physical asana practice to focus on what you're currently doing, how you're placing your foot, where you're putting your arm, where you're focusing your gaze. That really gets you centered into your body. And then how does your body feel? Notice how your body feels in that physical shape in that particular moment underneath that particular maybe level of stress. And then what I think is most important, and maybe I should have put this at the top, is the ability to feel and develop a breath that is deep and diaphragmatic and is not up here in the chest, not a short, shallow breath, but a very deep, full belly breath. And I put in here take in the good, because our brains are hardwired to first notice the bad. So to first think of what's wrong, what am I doing wrong, what should I be doing better, how do I compare to that other person over there? So there's always this invitation to shift the focus to what are you doing well, what can you learn from this situation, how is this challenge showing up to help you grow and be more of who you really are. So with that said, let me see if I can move my head around so you can see this image better. I mentioned that the goal in a yoga class, I guess you could say the anatomy of a yoga class, is to balance these two very important parts of our autonomic nervous system, the central nervous system, which is inclusive of parasympathetic response and sympathetic response. So over here on the right, you have sympathetic response, and this is that fight or flight state that, again, we actually kind of live in. Most of us live in this state of something's wrong, I'm being threatened, I can't be still, I can't take a full deep breath because I have to always be on the alert and ready to go. Well, that puts, as you can see, if you're looking at this right column here in red, it puts the system, the vital organs of the body, under a tremendous amount of stress, and when you aren't able to turn it off, it can develop into chronic disease over time. So contrastly on the left, now I'm not saying sympathetic nervous system reaction is bad 100% of the time. We do need it. It's an important part of our nervous system response. But we need it to be balanced with parasympathetic nervous system. And parasympathetic nervous system over here in the blue, ideally we learn to practice in our yoga practice how to make this a more automatic response, how to make this a more constant state of being. And you can tell, if you're not familiar with being in these two different states, there's a lot of different indicators with regard to what you may be in. So I always like to call this column parasympathetic response the rest and digest, because you can start to feel, you can see stimulate saliva, you can start to feel your digestive system working a little bit. So that might mean you can actually feel the saliva in your mouth. Your stomach may start gurgling. You might feel a little bit hungry, or you might just be starting to listen to the sounds of the belly growling. Obviously, heart rate slowing is such a good thing, and on a subtle body or an energetic level, we know in this state that we're safe, that we can be still, that we can rest. So this is where a lot of the real restorative aspects of the yoga practice come into play. I do have a link at the end of this if you're curious to learn more deeply about the nervous system. There's a link to this particular slide and page that goes more into detail on nervous system, but I'll leave it at that for now. So in this next slide, I just want to talk briefly about neuroplasticity and developing new neural pathways in our brains. And I love this image over here on the right because you can see this is kind of like mirroring a neural network, neuroplasticity in the brain. And it's such a great metaphor to akin it to like a river running through a mountain, or you could think of it as a path being carved through a forest. When we're learning something new or we have an experience, a new neural pathway is carved into the brain. And this helps us remember this experience is good or bad or whatever it was, whatever kind of bucket we put it in. And it's important to remember that neuroplasticity, it's malleable. We can change it. And deep grooves that have been there since childhood, maybe trauma or some sort of adverse experience that we have at an unconscious level, that's a real deep groove. That's a path you've been walking on for a long time. That's a river that's got a deep bed. And just like a river can change course, or a forest path can be grown over by people not traipsing on it, or some sort of other experience changing the course of the river, so too can that pathway in the brain change. So neuroplasticity, I like to think of it as developing a new habit or behavior that's going to serve us better. So we first, the way that I like to put this into practice is what Marissa Peer, who is a wonderful resource, and I have a link to an interview she's done about what she calls practicing AAA on the very last slide, and I highly recommend listening to that interview. So she talks about using AAA, so first becoming aware of that experience or that emotion or that feeling. So we have to become aware and acknowledge what we're feeling. And that can be scary. That can be something that maybe we don't feel like we have the skills to become aware of. And maybe it's something that we haven't slowed down enough to actually look at. And once you are in that place where you can slow down and look at this emotion, the second step she talks about is allowing it or accepting that feeling, even if it feels like, oh, I shouldn't have this feeling, like I shouldn't feel jealous, I shouldn't feel angry at my partner for leaving his dirty dishes in the sink, and it's not acceptable. But that second step in the process of that, developing that neuroplasticity or developing that new neural pathway, is to accept your feelings for what they are. Third step that Marissa talks about is articulating it. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because when we're in parasympathetic response, the articulation can be a little bit less well received if we are doing it in the heat of the moment, in the heat of that, oh wow, I have this really strong emotion and I just need to get it out there, which sometimes it's what we do, and it's great to get it out there regardless. But I'm not suggesting that you see these dirty dishes in the sink day after day and you turn to your partner and you scream at them, I told you blah blah blah, don't leave your dirty dishes in the sink, and then a whole huge fight blows up in your face when that's not what you were meaning for, right? So that third step, articulate, is after you've spent some time becoming aware of your feelings, accepting your feelings. Maybe the articulation point is going to a place where you can be by yourself and, have a conversation with yourself in the mirror. Like, why does this bother me so much? What is it about the dishes in the sink that bothers me so much? Is it that I feel disrespected? I feel like I'm the one that is expected to clean up after this person, and I want some respect, so I want my partner to help out, or I want more of an equal partnership. I don't want to be the one that's always responsible for the dishes. So being able to articulate that for yourself, just for yourself, to understand where you're coming from. And then when you're in a calm state of mind, practicing that, hey partner, I've been noticing dishes in the sink. If it's wise, if it's necessary to take that next step to have that conversation, sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Hey partner, I see these dishes in the sink and it makes me feel disrespected, and I want us to find a way to work together as a partnership. And I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. So you've got your 3 A's, which help develop new helpful neural pathways in your brain, so that you realize that when things challenge you and when you have an adverse experience, you have the tools to change that experience into something helpful and uplifting. You have the ability and the skill set to make change in your life for good, for better. So that's neuroplasticity and creating new neural pathways. And that might not sound like it's relevant to a yoga practice, but that's why we're going to put it into practice here. And I want you to see how that would fit into an actual class on your mat. Because if you think about the anatomy of a practice, that's actually on the next slide. So we'll go forward to this one and then we'll go back to put it into practice. So regardless of the style of class you're doing, they're really all kind of designed in the same way, your asana. And if you're doing a more like robust practice, like a vinyasa or a power vinyasa or a heated class, you're really going to get the stimulus of sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, the moving through challenge under pressure. But the difference in a yoga class is you're doing it in a safe and controlled environment. You're doing it in a place where you get to understand your stress response. You get to look at it. Maybe you get to look at it wisely. So you get to actually practice those 3 A's. You get to practice your awareness. You notice if you're working towards a challenging pose, one that you feel like, I can't do it, I shouldn't be able to do it, or I should look like that person over there. First, you get to become aware of that, acknowledge it, and then you get to accept it for what it is. Well, maybe I have an injury, or maybe my body just isn't built that way structurally, anatomically. My bones don't move in that way. I have less range of motion, and that is what it is. And if you need to have a little dialogue with yourself about it in that moment, you can say, under that stress response, you can say, and that's okay, and or I wish I could do that, but in this moment right now, it's not going to happen, but maybe I'll try again tomorrow, or whatever it is that's going to be helpful and uplifting for you in that moment. So we get to practice these 3 A's in our actual yoga class in a safe and controlled environment. Like I said at the very beginning of this chat, the breath is that key consistent piece throughout that helps us create that balance of the nervous system, that helps us create that consistency, that helps us really tap into parasympathetic nervous system response, which slows down the heart rate, gets our rest and digest moving. And then the thing that really integrates all of that together is your shavasana at the end of your practice. And your shavasana, if you're not familiar with an asana class, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say almost every single yoga class is going to end that way. It is the last pose you will do. It is the most important pose you will do. Please try not to skip it. Please set yourself up for a very comfortable and supported shavasana. And if that means taking your device into bed, right? Like if you're doing a yoga class at home on YouTube or something, take that device into bed because that's more comfortable, or bend your knees, or add pillows and blankets and support system. Make your shavasana comfortable because it's really going to behoove you to allow yourself to integrate, to rest in this final shape. This is where we get the most bang for our buck in terms of parasympathetic nervous system response. So I recommend spending at least 6 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes if you have it, but try for six minutes in your shavasana. So let's put that into practice. We'll just do a really short, seated, guided meditation. So take a moment to sit back in your chair, wherever you're seating. Feel your feet flat on the ground. And I've listed out these steps, but I'm not going to look at that because this will be for you to go back and look at later. So just take a moment to close your eyes here. Feel your hands resting face down on your thighs. And move your torso back and forth, and maybe side to side. Feel your shoulders shift back over your hips. Feel your chin become parallel with the ground. So chin kind of slightly tilts, but press the back of your head to that space behind you so you have a nice tall spine. And just like we talked about, we become aware of the body. So you might notice any particular places that feel more sensation than others, or where does the mind go in the body? And can the mind go down into the body? Can you feel your feet on the floor? Can you feel the texture of your hands resting on your thighs? Can you feel your jaw relax? Can you feel your spine grow tall? Can you become aware of your breath? And if you're able to, can you take an inhale through your nose? When you choose your exhale, it can be out through the mouth, it can be out through the nose. I like to play with both and kind of move back and forth between those two. So just try that a couple of times, inhaling through the nose if you're able, and choosing an exhale that makes sense for you through nose or mouth. Try it twice more. One last time. Nice and slow, let the chin draw towards the chest. Take a breath in and a breath out. Blink the eyes open, take in the space around you on the floor. Notice the colors. And then arrive back into your seat, into your space. So you might take a moment here to notice what came up during that brief guided meditation and to notice what is good. What is good right now? Can you just call to mind one thing that you can appreciate or have some gratitude for? So parasympathetic nervous system response, we just actively stimulated by taking a couple of minutes out of this time that we have together to be in the body, to experience the breath, to pause enough to become aware of the feelings, to accept them, and to articulate them. What I always like to do after a practice like that is journal. Writing things down for me is so therapeutic. That is how I articulate my feelings best. So maybe you pause your video here, or if you have some time after this lecture, take a minute or two to just journal about that experience. So back to different styles of yoga that are geared at mainly parasympathetic nervous system response. This is our rest and digest system. Remember from our graph, it was that blue column on the left. So we're targeting a subtle body response that's going to put us into that state we just experienced in our little meditation. Yin is a great practice for this. If you haven't experienced a yin class before, you can head to outside the studio, and I have a bunch of different options to try a yin practice. You can also just Google it. There are tons of free resources out there on YouTube. Lots of people are putting out great content for yin, especially right now. Restorative is another great one. It differs from yin in that restorative is really seeking to just target parasympathetic nervous system response. And so we're asking the muscles, the tendons, the ligaments, the tissue to just go offline, and we're just looking for restoration and relaxation in the body. So it might feel like a practice where you set up all these different kind of shavasana-like positions where you're floating on this little cloud, you're completely supported, and you're not really looking for a stretch or a sensation per se, versus a yin practice where you're going to feel more sensation in the body. Meditation, you just had the experience of that. Again, that's something that you can Google. There's a lot of great apps out there: Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer. I have some meditations on my YouTube channel, as well as in the resources page, the last page of this. If you're looking for more from me, you can find it. And I sometimes I put meditation / yoga nidra because in my practice, I sometimes use them interchangeably. If you're not familiar with yoga nidra, I highly, highly recommend checking this out. Nidra is a word that means sleep. And so when we put yoga nidra together, it's like this idea of awakened or enlightened sleep. And it's a practice that you do lying down on your back, as if you were in Shavasana, but super supported. So you want to be sure you're patting the back body, back of the head, back of the shoulders, hips, because you're lying there for a period of sometimes 20 to 40 minutes. So you want to be sure the body is fully supported and comfortable. And this is a practice that it's much like a guided meditation. The main difference is that you're asked to lie down on your back, versus a lot of meditations are done seated in a chair, on the floor, whatever's most comfortable for your body. Mantra is another great tool for stress and anxiety. And this is one of my favorite practices because it works with the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve runs down the central spinal column, and it's really soothing for the parasympathetic nervous system to stimulate vagus nerve. So the reason that mantra works so well is because we use our voice, and it creates this vibration, this resonance throughout the body that's very tangible. It's very quick to react. And mantra means chant. So you can simply just chant Om. You can simply just kind of hum, like you'll get that same stimulation. If you are familiar with a mantra practice and you do have a chant from a teacher that you practiced with, this is a great way to do it. And you might see a lot of us yogis, we have these things called malas. So you might see a lot of yogis wearing these, and then, some of them are aesthetic. People wear them aesthetically, but they do have a purpose, and that purpose is for this mantra practice. There are typically 108 beads on your mala. This is called a mala. The necklace is called a mala. And the idea is that whatever your mantra is that you're chanting, so it could be Om, again, like just Om, 108 times you go around your mala chanting your mantra. So just Om, 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 right? 108 times. By the end of that, it's like you're floating on a cloud. You have definitely stimulated parasympathetic nervous system and the vagus nerve. So these are my favorite go-to practices during a challenging time when stress and anxiety is an all-time high in our culture at home. Highly recommend checking out these practices, Googling them. I've given you some resources here on this last page, which I'll show you right now. Just real quick, Buddha's Brain is a great book. It's a great text. If you're looking for more resources on that, what we talked about first, the neurology behind a little bit more science, but accessible science behind why practices like meditation and yoga work so well, why they've withstood the test of time for stress and anxiety, why they're so popular as a tool for stress and anxiety. And then that graph I showed you at the beginning, that nervous system graph, that News Medical Life Sciences on the nervous system is an article, a full article, if you want to dive in. If you're nerdy like me, I love to kind of just dive into the science behind what is all this and why does it work. That third link is Marissa Peer. She is she's a really well-known psychologist who goes into detail about those 3 A's. She calls it her triple A's: awareness, acceptance, and articulation. On an emotional level, on an experiential level. And then these last 3 are all things that I have produced. A Yoga Nidra practice, links to that. I have a couple of different ones there, longer and shorter versions, and a Yin Yoga practice. That's just a link right to my YouTube page. But if you get to my YouTube page, you'll see that I have a lot of different styles of yoga on there, from vinyasa to yin, so you could try a few. And then the practice of meditation, this is a blog post that I wrote a while back, and it's a brief overview of meditation, and then some really easy tips and tricks and resources to those apps that I mentioned before, like Calm, Headspace, Insight Timer. And so I hope that inspires you to maybe just try one. Or if you have these practices, share it with somebody that you love, who you know could really benefit from this. At a time like this, I just think it's so important to continue to share our knowledge, continue to share that feeling and that sense of being able to cultivate well-being and being able to self-soothe, self-regulate, which is really what I love about the practice of yoga so much. So thank you so much for joining me today. Please feel free to leave comments or suggestions or even questions, and I will be back soon with more. Thank you.